All of these stories tonight are true. Saeed Molai was born in Azerbaijan and began to train as a judoka, which is an athlete who competes in the sport of judo, by the age of 10. He was noted as a prodigy, recruited, and then trained at a premier Iranian fighting dojo. By the time he was 23 years old, he had won a silver medal at the World Championship, and within a few years after that, he was the world champion. In 2019, Saeed was in Tokyo, Japan, fighting in the semifinals to defend his title. If he won his upcoming match, Iran versus Belgium, his final fight would be against an Israeli opponent, Sagi Muki. Sagi and Saeed had never met, and yet both had been told throughout their entire training and competitive lives that the other was his mortal enemy, a representative of everything wrong with both the sport and the world at large. Because the Iranian regime refuses to acknowledge or engage with Israel in any kind of sporting event, the Minister of Sport called Saeed's coaches and ordered him to take a dive in that semifinal round. There's a bit of irony in this, of course, that the same system which tells Saeed that Sagi is his mortal enemy will actually never allow the two of them to fight. Saeed lost that bout against the Belgian judoka, and in the aftermath he exposed his coaches and his handlers who gave him that order to lose on purpose. He refused to return to Iran, and fearing for his life, he defected to Germany, where he joined a team of asylum-seeking athletes. In order to compete in the 2020 Olympic Games, Saeed needed to qualify by winning a Grand Prix. And so, for the first time in his life, he traveled to Israel to train in preparation for the Olympic qualifier. And who was there to be his sparring partner and his #1 fan, praising him all over social media, celebrating his return to the sport? None other than Sagi Muki, the Israeli judoka whose very presence on that judo mat had been the cause for Saeed's defection. Saeed did in fact qualify at the Tel Aviv Grand Prix, trained with the Israeli Olympic judo team in Tel Aviv, competed in the 2020 Olympic Games, though as many of you will probably remember, they actually happened in 2021, and there he won the silver medal. During his victory speech, he turned to the camera from Israel Sports Network and said, "Thank you to Israel for the good energy. This medal is dedicated also to Israel, and I hope that the Israelis are happy for this win." And speaking in Hebrew, he added in, "Todah." Sometimes tshuva is wonderful and simple and hopeful. Forgive, change, grow, overcome. Ben and Sarah, and these are not their real names, were platonic friends in university, separated by a few years and a little bit of will they, won't they energy. He was a junior when she was a freshman, but they shared a friend group, bonded in the theater department. Over the course of university, Ben developed a significant dependence on alcohol, which he masked as just, normal college drinking. The fall after graduation, he went back to campus for homecoming. And feeling lonely at a cast party, ignored and depressed, Ben proceeded to get blackout and very angry drunk. Other people at the party, amused at his belligerent state, began probing him and pushing him, asking him to say what was really going on in that head of his. Drunk and miserable, Ben confessed all of his secret feelings, both the good ones and the terrible ones, lambasting the friends who he had felt had abandoned him when he graduated, his misery at the job that he hated, and expressing his unrequited love, his jealousy, and his physical attraction in the most graphic terms to everybody and anyone who would listen. The subject of his attraction included many people at the party, but chief amongst them was his friend Sarah, who was abroad that semester. Mid-rant, a peculiar look passed over Ben's face. He leaned over, was sick, and passed out. he woke up with a terrible hangover. No memory of the evening, not of anything he had said, and he sobered himself up, finished his homecoming weekend, and returned to his meandering post-college life. It wasn't until nearly a month later that he got a tearful, angry overseas phone call from Sarah, who had just heard from one of the other people at the party about all the demeaning things Ben had said he wanted to do with her. Their friendship was over, and Ben was stunned. He knew she was telling the truth, but he also didn't remember saying any of those things. In fact, it turned out he didn't remember a lot when he was drinking. Was there anything he could do to make it up to her? No, she replied, hanging up. And speaking to that joint group of friends, Ben found out that this hadn't been his first offense. There had been other evenings, other blackouts, that he had never even known was going on. He had a real problem. He determined that if he couldn't repair the friendship, he could at least repair himself. And when Ben told me this story, it was at a program in Beit Tshuva, a Jewish recovery center in LA, where he was treating his alcoholism. He was now a sponsor for younger alcoholics who were also going through recovery. And in retrospect, he was grateful to Sarah, who still wouldn't speak to him. Her painful rejection of his friendship and his desire to even make it up had been the wake-up call that he needed to realize how far gone he already was. Sometimes teshuvah doesn't have a clean ending, and the fixing that we do leaves rough edges, scars, and loss. And yet it's still worthy, and it's still worth doing. Kate moved to Yellowknife as a broadcaster, her very first job out of school. And to quote her, Yellowknife isn't for everybody. It's cold and bitter and poorly funded, and it has a debilitating homelessness issue. And it's also where I had my eyes open to the issues that face Indigenous people in this country. To her surprise, Kate met a lot of good people in Yellowknife, including a woman named Sophie. She was a beautiful soul who lit up entire rooms with her presence and warmed people's hearts, even as she was experiencing homelessness. Sophie was happy to share her life story with Kate, or in fact, just about anybody who would listen. She was from somewhere in the northern part of the Northwest Territories, near Inuvik, and it had been a happy place for her once. And then one day, it wasn't. She'd never had much of an education. Her parents had been residential school survivors, and they passed their trauma, their lack of faith in the state and the government, their hopelessness, down to her. She'd come south to Yellowknife in defiance of that hopelessness, dreaming, in fact, to find something better in her life. But she got stuck instead. Not literally stuck, but systemically stuck. Stuck when you realize you have no way out because there is no support, and there is no home, and there is no community that even cares about whether you are alive or dead. And Sophie liked to hold court at Tim Hortons, where she made new friends and chatted people up every single day because, as was mentioned, she was generous and warm and a guide to the homeless Indigenous youth who were similarly coming to Yellowknife and getting stuck. And she was an addict, fighting her alcoholism. And Kate learned from her that if you bought mouthwash and kept it on especially cold nights, the alcohol would separate as everything else in the bottle froze. And then you could take a knife and slice that frozen bottle open and suck out the booze to get drunk at a tenth of the price that a handle of cheap vodka would cost you. Sophie was known to many in the city, but to many more, she was just that homeless woman, if they even thought of her at all. And when she died in the late spring, she died alone, and she died unseen, invisible to all of the systems which should have noticed her very basic humanity. Kate wrote 1 year ago in Sophie's honor that the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation means a lot to me, because for me it's a step towards healing people like Sophie, people that never even had a chance to live their life. So on this day, educate yourself and listen and learn and understand that Indigenous people have been screaming for help for generations. So let's give them that help. Sometimes tshuva is hearing and witnessing the stories and the people that we really wish we could ignore, and dedicating ourselves to not ever ignoring them again. So earlier today, the Holy Blossom Temple Interfaith Committee, chaired by Coleman Green, attended a special event at Tollkeepers Park to witness and support the telling of these stories. And you can join their efforts. And furthermore, this Yom Kippur afternoon, amongst the selections of afternoon study sessions we are offering, Indigenous Elder Catherine Brooks and Holy Blossom congregant Stephen Bookman will join in conversation. And we hope, in the spirit of this challenging work, that you will join them on our most sacred day. On this Shabbat Shuvah and this National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, may we continue to be engaged in the holy and heartbreaking work of healing ourselves and our community and our nation and our world. And we do so by knowing the stories, both the bright and the wonderful, the painful and challenging, and all the ones that are in between. Shabbat Shalom.